Okay, special guests from the National Shooting Sports Foundation, Bill Brassard and Mark Oliva. Bill's the Senior Director of Communications, and Mark is the Director of Public Affairs. And we want to talk to him a little bit about Project Childsafe. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, doing very well. Thanks for having us.
You bet. Thank you so much for coming on. First off, let's talk. I know a lot about the NSSF, and you guys do fantastic work. And I know every shop in town knows who you guys are, and all the ranges know exactly who you are because you are very supportive and super helpful. But tell the listeners exactly who the NSSF is, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, who you guys are, what you guys do.
Yeah, so the National Shooting Sports Foundation is the trade association for the firearms industry. So our members are the manufacturers, retailers, shooting ranges, the distributors and publishers of outdoor media, hunting organizations, conservation organizations. So, we are the group that basically provides expertise and training for people on one side of the counter, not the customer side, so the business side of things.
So advice and expertise in the way of how to manage your business, how to manage your range, or what type of things do you guys work with them on?
Yeah,
I'll jump in here real quick on this, Bill.
Yeah, sure.
We do quite a bit actually on the ability for our member companies to be able to do business. Part of that is the work that we're doing in the state capitals and in Washington, D.C., to make sure that we're not burdened down by onerous regulations and laws that are going to really interrupt the way we do business. And I think probably the most visible way that your listeners probably saw that happen this past year was when we had the COVID shutdown start. So when the COVID shutdown started, our folks were working with the Department of Homeland Security to get firearm manufacturers, distributors, retailers, ranges, all listed as essential services, so that way they could stay open. And that was fundamental for a couple of reasons. One is we have military obligations. We have to be able to fulfill those contracts. But two is also law enforcement. Unless you're a big law enforcement department like Los Angeles Police Department or New York City, probably chances are that the local law enforcement are buying their firearms from the local retailers. And I used to live there in Southern California. I know the area very well, so I know that my local police departments, when I lived there, were not buying their firearms directly from manufacturers. They were getting them from their local police departments. So they need to be able to stay open for that. But most importantly, your ability to exercise your Second Amendment did not come with a pandemic clause.
Right.
That it had to stay open during that time, so you were able to exercise your Second Amendment rights. And in some states, that came down sometimes to a county by county. Very much so there in California.
Yeah,
we're having to fight that county by county up in the Bay Area and around Los Angeles.
It was ridiculous. It was about a year ago. The Trump administration started putting together, a multi-page, I forget, dozen pages of an instruction. Basically, here's states. Here's how to deal with shutting down businesses was kind of the gist of it. And there was a section that basically said you can't shut these businesses down because you'll grind everything to a halt. It was pretty clear to us that gun shops were a part of that. But just like you're saying, it was kind of this weird patchwork, county by county. If you lived in an anti-gun county, they wanted to shut down gun shops. If you lived in a pro-gun county, then they wanted to keep them open. Here in San Diego, it was split right down the center. We actually had a local official, a county board of supervisor, just unilaterally, kind of off the cuff, say, "Oh no, they all need to shut down." And man, we had to swing into action. And I know you guys were a big part of that across the state, but eventually, maybe a couple weeks after that, the administration came out with rock solid, yes, gun shops, gun ranges are essential. And I know you guys were a big part of that, and I appreciate it very much. Okay, so let's talk about Project Childsafe. Tell us about Project Childsafe. This month, actually, on Gun Owners Radio, it's Gun Safety Month. So we thought this was a perfect subject, and we wanted to hear more about it. So tell us about Project Childsafe.
Sure, happy to. So Project Childsafe is the firearms industry's gun safety program. It's been running for a little more than 20 years, and it's really active or has been active at one time or another in almost every community in the country through partnerships with law enforcement. So any law enforcement agency can request free educational literature and locks from Project Childsafe at projectchildsafe.org, and then run a gun safety program in their community. So its emphasis really is on encouraging responsible gun ownership, making sure people understand how to safely handle and secure their firearms when they're not under their direct control. And the idea is obviously to help prevent accidents, particularly of children, and preventing thefts of firearms, as well as suicides, which is an increasing concern of NSSF these days.
So how's that implemented? Like, how's that executed?
Yeah, so any law enforcement agency can request the locks and literature, and then we help them launch a campaign in the community to raise awareness, not just for getting a free gun lock, but to help people understand how to make a decision on what the best storage device is for them. So we know there's a lot of new gun owners out there. A lot of them are seeking information on how to keep guns out of the wrong hands, out of kids' hands, and people who are at risk. And so we help them work out what device is best for them. So a lot of people purchase guns for personal and home defense. They want quick access to them. A cable lock or a full-size gun safe may not be the right choice for them in their home circumstance. So we try to steer them towards a quick access lockbox, for example. So only they have access to it, but kids and other unauthorized persons in the home do not have access to it.
I get a lot. People ask me a lot, hey, I want to buy a new gun. How much does it cost? And I always give them a range, and I always figure in a good $500, $600, maybe even $1,000, $600 to $1,000 above that for things like, if you have kids, especially, you have to have some kind of locking device, something to keep it secure. What's the industry advice, or what's NSSF's advice, National Shooting Sports Foundation's advice, if someone has a kid, or just in general? Let's start in general. If I have a gun, when should it be locked?
The gun should be locked when it's not under your control. So basically on your person or very close by. And so when you're not controlling that gun really needs to be locked so somebody else cannot gain control of it. And among the best ways to do that is the free cable lock that we provide, but a quick access lockbox or a lockable gun safe or the gun case is a way to do it. And I would say that also includes making sure that firearm is not accessible to anybody else but yourself in a car or in a vehicle. Mm-hmm. No thefts of guns from vehicles is on the rise, and particularly in urban areas. And so we want to remind people that they make lock boxes for cars or trucks and devices that can be secured in other ways, to like a seat stanchion with a metal cable. And so it's easy to accomplish safe storage in a vehicle and not rely on your car's door lock or a glove compartment box.
So what?
I want to jump in just real quick on this too, because I think one of the things that Bill's been really push on this with Project Childsafe, and I really give him a lot of credit for all the work that he's done, is a couple of years ago, and you talked about kids, and I'm going through this now because my kids are now to the point where they're grown, but throughout my life, my storage needs were they changed. They changed, year by year as my kids grew up. When I was a single guy living by myself, my storage needs were pretty simple. Then after I got married and I had kids, then I had to start, reassessing what those storage needs were going to be to make sure that those firearms are going to be able to lock and inaccessible to my kids. And listen, we all know, any of us who have kids, you have no secrets as a parent, and that includes your firearms. I mean, your children are going to know where they're at, so you want to make sure that they're going to be locked up and inaccessible to them. But even as my kids got older and I could trust them around the firearms, not to touch the firearms, as they understood this, as they became teenagers and then young adults, well, now I've got grandkids now running around the house. So I've got to reassess my storage needs all over again. And I think that's important. And Bill's actually has tools on Project Childsafe's website to help people walk through that process of assessing what those storage needs are going to be as you go through different phases of your life.
Now, what do you think about? I hear this. I don't want to say a lot, but I hear this often enough that I think it's needs a good answer, and I'm not honestly quite sure how to address it. When parents say, "Hey, you know what? I don't lock my firearms up around my kids. I just teach my kids respect for firearms." Do you guys have a stance on that, or what are your thoughts on that, or how would you address that, or is there any literature that would help with that?
Yeah, I would say, that people should talk to their kids to teach them respect for firearms and safety around firearms. But locking a firearm is important because you never know when your kid is going to bring other kids into the home. And, we know kids snoop around. We know kids are curious about all sorts of things, including firearms. So we want to make sure that those guns are not accessible to the friends of your children. And then there's the theft issue as well. I mean, we've talked about thefts out of vehicles. Thefts from homes are a concern. And, firearms are expensive. They're your property. You don't want them falling into the hands of a criminal and even potentially being used in a crime. The other thing is, and Mark, sort of touched on it, is sort of the way things evolve in a family. And we're very concerned about self-harm. Some 60% of all firearm fatalities are suicides and not accidents. They're not homicides. And, people go through phases in their life, and you never know when things may get to be a little overwhelming for someone. So we want to make sure those firearms are not accessible to somebody going through a really difficult time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem. I think that's excellently put. It doesn't seem like it's enough. I'm not a parent, but it doesn't seem like it's enough to just teach your kids about firearms, especially when they're younger. It seems like, hey, respect is important and knowledge is important, but it does seem like I don't think that there needs to be a mandate from the government, but something needs to happen. So we're talking about their project called Project Childsafe, which is fantastic. So how can people get more information on that, or what else how can people use it? Is it always done through law enforcement agencies, or is there a civilian element?
Yeah, well, the website is the place to go for tons of information on responsible gun ownership, how to store your guns properly, how to talk to your kids about gun safety, whether they're really young kids or whether they're teens, how to make the right choice on finding the safety device that will work for you. So that's all at projectchildsafe.org. And I would add we have one new resource that's really great, and I'd like to draw people's attention to it,
Sure.
especially if they're parents. And it's the Parent's Guide to Understanding Youth Mental Health and preventing unauthorized access to firearms. So we know the pandemic has certainly added stress to people's lives, and that includes, adults and teens, and it's raised concerns about mental health and self-harm. So we want parents to better understand how they can recognize when their kids are going through a difficult time for whatever reason, and to make sure that they can't access a firearm or anything else that in the house that might be used for self-harm. It's a real concern during these times. So projectchildsafe.org, tons of information there.
That's an enormous subject. I mean, obviously self-harm and mental health is a huge passionate subject, and can lead to self-harm is always a horrible tragedy, but mental health can lead to horrible tragedies. They're not always necessarily connected. I don't want to misrepresent, but one of the things I think that there's and people should care about it just because people are important, and people are valuable, but there is it gives you this. When something bad happens, the other side uses this tragedy as leverage. They to basically advance their political agenda. So if you're sitting at home thinking to yourself, well, that's somebody else's problem, or that's their kid's problem, or my kids are fine, or whatever, this isn't just good advice for some parents. This is being armed with this knowledge and being able to deliver this knowledge to people around you in your circle of influence is activism. This helps the cause, in a very broad way. Not only are you helping people, which is an enormously important thing, but you're also helping the cause. I don't, did
Yeah,
I?
that's exactly right.
Okay, did I explain that well?
No, you did. You really got right to the point, and that's what we're trying to do at NSSF and with our partner, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, is to broadly educate the firearms community about suicide and prevention to help them understand, warning signs and risk factors, and how to go about having a conversation with someone who is going through a difficult time, because suicide can be prevented. That's what we want to get across to people, and that there are ways to have that brave conversation and to literally save a life.
Now, is there a distribution plan? Now, let's say that my target audience that I just explained to, like, hey, you're sitting out there listening to us, and you're thinking to yourself, my kids are grown, or I don't have kids, or whatever. How can they help distribute this information? What can they do to get your information out to the world?
Yeah, so the best place to go is projectchildsafe.org, but there is also additional information at nssf.org/safety. And so I would encourage them to go there, for general gun safety information, as well as our information about suicide prevention.
And then maybe take that information and share it with others at a very basic, simple level. At least, go learn about it, go learn what to say and why, and then take that information and share it with others.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, it's important, especially in the topic of suicide and mental health, to keep the conversation open that, when people don't talk about these things, as difficult as these conversations are, when they don't talk about them, that's when bad things can happen. And so we want to take the stigma away from talking about suicide, talking about mental health, and have more conversation about that, more information out there, because, statistics show that almost 1 out of every 2 people have somehow been touched by suicide, and it's not always connected with a firearm, right? So we know people attempt self-harm with other things, including drugs and other substance abuse. And so it's just important to know about the topic overall, because it is a concern throughout the country, and especially during this time of the pandemic when people are under a lot of stress. Well,
when we go to a range, when I go to a range and I'm taking a class or doing a competition, something like that, we've all heard gun safety is everyone's responsibility. And I don't think that ends at the range. And this is certainly a way to continue that same productive and good attitude once you've left the range, is to get first off, educate yourself with your program and the resources that you have, but then get it out to people. Don't keep it to yourself. Now, 2020, we had a ton of new gun owners in San Diego and in the rest of the nation. Did you guys see an enormous uptick, or what kind of stats did you guys see? I know you guys keep a lot of records.
Are you saying that there's a hard time finding guns and ammo in San Diego County?
Everywhere, it's a hard time to find anything.
Yeah, it's not surprising. We actually had 21 million background checks for the sale of a firearm in 2020, and that was by far a record that we've had for any year previous.
So 21 million background checks just in the year 2020.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So to kind of put that in perspective, our best year previous to 2020 was 2016, and we had 15.7 million background checks then. And if you wanted to back it up just 1 year, in 2019 we had 13.2 million background checks. So we had an over 7 million jump in people buying firearms. And the interesting part about this is, during the summer, we really wanted to kind of get a handle on who was buying these firearms. And, of course, there's no national registry. There's nowhere that you can go look to say Mark Oliva didn't own a gun yesterday, but today he does. So we looked at that. We asked our retailers, what are you seeing in these stores? And they told us that 40% of the people that were buying a gun in 2020 were buying one for the very first time. So based on that 21 million figure, that's over 8.4 million people who bought a gun for the very first time.
Wow.
In 2020. And that's a bit of a tectonic shift when we start talking about gun ownership in America. These are people who, before, firearm ownership was a rhetorical question. You could talk about it at the cocktail party, but you really didn't have skin in the game. Well, now they literally made an investment with hundreds of dollars to go in and say, I'm going to become a gun owner this year. And the primary driving reason behind that was safety. Interestingly as well is 40% of the people who are buying guns in 2020, women.
Yeah.
And the biggest increase we saw of any demographic group from 2019 to 2020 was among African-American men and women purchasing firearms. And that was a 58% increase. So what I try to get that across to people is today's gun ownership doesn't fit quite neatly into that nice neat little box that everyone tries to put it in, that it's, old, male, and pale that are just buying guns. Well, that's not true anymore. It's really becoming like the rest of America is today's gun owner.
I think it was even more skewed in San Diego as far as at least it was specifically what I'm talking about is the percentage of new gun owners. I think there was a even higher percentage of people who are buying a gun for the first time in places like San Diego, where I don't think gun ownership is quite as there's not quite the depth of gun ownership in San Diego County that there is in maybe some other parts of the country. And I think that that 40% is probably even higher in places like San Diego. And we've done a number of things to help. San Diego County Gun Owners has done a number of things to help try to educate new shooters, and we've had a lot of really great success. But one really quick, we had this really cool shooting social that's just for new shooters, and we realized 2 days prior that we open it up and just say, hey, anybody that knows anybody who needs to come and learn, come on down. It's a low price, and we'll teach you just the basics and get you ready for a professional class, because we want to make sure that you take a professional, day long or multi-day class. Every single one that signed up was a woman, and we looked at the roster going in, and we thought, wow, this isn't a woman's group. It wasn't like the women's association or whatever that was doing it. Every single person that found us, that shooting social just happened to be a woman, which we're really, really proud of. Now, you guys do a really great job at having resources for first-time gun owners. What types of resources do you guys have, or what have you guys? Is there anything you've had to set up? I mean, you already had a number of things in place, but what can a new gun owner learn by going to NSSF?
Yeah, I think Bill probably has some of the best information because it kind of ties in with a lot of the safety programs that he's been doing.
Yeah, so, gun owners can go to projectchildsafe.org to acquire all that safety information about storage and so forth. But I would also encourage new gun owners to go to a website called letsgoshooting.org. And there they will really get a great overview of the different types of the shooting sports, that they can get involved in. Because we want them to get out to the range, because somebody who's using their gun on a regular basis is going to be more proficient with their skills. They're going to be a safer gun owner if they understand, sort of a second nature on how their gun works, how to unload it safely. And so that's what I would say. Letsgoshooting.org.
That's awesome. That's very, very cool. Is this trend going to continue in 2021, or is the lack of demand kind of killing it, or what do you think? Real quick, we actually gotta part ways, but what do you think? Is it going to continue in 2021?
Yeah. Well, in January we had 2 million background checks, which of course was another record, and everything we're hearing colloquially and anecdotally is that it is not slowing down in February either.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you very much, Bill and Mark from National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Thanks for watching our Magnum show, where we dig into gun owners topics a little more in depth. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.